Awesome. Well, I'm going to introduce our interviewer, moderator, and thank you all for coming for the Zoom call with author James Lee Burke. Uh, Jim does not travel too much. I couldn't make this long distance, but this is the next best thing. And I would like to thank his publicist, Erin Mitchell, for making this happen. When I spoke to her about who we could get to moderate and interview, her first person that was out her mouth was CJ. And I emailed CJ and she said yes, and it all worked out. So, a little bit about CJ Lutz Diego grew up in St. Louis. She studied journalism at Indiana University. She reported in Haiti, and after graduation, she also has a love of Haitian art. She worked at Field and Stream magazine in New York, but moved to Charleston in 2013 to work for Garden and Gun magazine. She is now the senior editor and covers books, gardens, and travel. Her very best story ideas always come from Louisiana. She developed a friendship with James Lee Burke and is so grateful to be here today. And so are we. And so please welcome CJ Letts Diego.
Thank you. It is so fun to be here. Um, Jim, can you see me?
Yeah, Shirley, how you doing? We talked on the phone this morning.
Thank you for being here. And I just wanted to thank your hometown community. Along the Teche, there is this spirit here, the spirit of welcome. Everyone who has greeted me said, "You are very welcome here." And I feel that not just in your words, but in your making sure that I have enough food, making sure that I have a drink of water, making sure, have you gone and seen the irises? The way that you welcome is so sincere. And I travel a lot in my job at Garden and Gun. I think I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to travel all throughout the South, and I think there's a spirit and an energy when someone is proud of their small town, and that's happening here. So you have lifted me up. This has been a highlight of my year. I'm so honored to be here. I also, I don't see him here, but Peter Podtoot is really a fan of your native irises, and I'm so thankful for him for encouraging me to check those out. So keep an eye out for irises. More to come there. I think there's another festival in the works. Um, Let me tell you a little bit about my friendship with James Lee Burke. Are people familiar with Garden and Gun magazine? Is anyone a reader? Yay. They know it, Jim. They know the magazine. Our readers
Mhm.
are absolutely obsessed with James Lee Burke. If we do a book roundup of new releases, they'll look, does James Lee Burke have one? That's what they want to know. They want to know what he's working on. And so I started noticing that if there was ever a mention of James Lee Burke, our readers were picking up the magazine. They were clicking on those articles. So, schemer that I am, I thought, I'm going to keep pecking away at Jim, and maybe one day he'll write for us. Well, he kept being busy, kept saying, I've got things going on. But, he'd give me a little quote here and there. But what really changed it was when I asked him about fishing. And I asked him about his childhood memories here. And he finally agreed to write something. And I'm going to read you just a little snippet of what he wrote. And I hope you'll go and look up the full article. The next day was unseasonably warm. The sun spangled in the live oaks along Bayou Teche. Then a purple cloud moved across the sun, and immediately rain rings chained the surface of the water. Even at my early age, the rain always struck me like a secular baptism, cold and clean and magical, clicking on the live oaks and palm fronds and the elephant ears that undulated in the current, humming like a sewing machine close to the bank. Back then, southern Louisiana was Edenic, like an island that had floated loose from the Caribbean and attached itself to the rim of the American South. I loved Louisiana, as I do today, and I'll let you read the rest of it. But Jim, I wanted to turn to you and ask you, what is it about New Iberia and Bayou Teche that continues to resonate with you in your writing?
Well, thank you very much for that kind of reading. You're a very good reader. That's a good question. There's something magical about Louisiana, particularly the southern part of the state. Uh, there's no question in my mind that it's just one of the finest places I've ever been, and it's like every morning getting up. Well, in Eden, that's it. It's it's a pretty good place to be. But anyway, and of course, the memories never go away from you. That's we bide our time about this and that, but Louisiana is a special place, particularly, as I say, I'm big Acadiana.
And in that story, you had a pretty funny fishing thing happen. The only event of its kind. I think there was a rake involved. Do you remember what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I'd never caught a fish before, and behind the old Burke home, uh, there was a big tree that uh, hung over the bayou. And my father, this was January 1941, and he said, "Well, you're going to catch a fish today," and he borrowed a cane pole from a black man named Baptiste, and I caught a fish. The plunger went down and I ripped the uh, cane into the air and it broke the cane and the fish, it was a goggle-eyed perch, got caught up in the Spanish moss. This poor fish. And my dad went and borrowed a rake, a garden rake from this from Baptiste, and raked the fish down from the tree, and then took the hook out and set the fish, the goggle-eye perch, free. And he said, "We just made history. The only time a fish has ever been caught by a rake on top of a tree."
And did you continue to fish after that? Has fishing been a big part of your life?
I don't Well, I suspect, yeah. No, I don't remember, but I never will forget that fish up in the tree.
Tell us a little bit about some of your other favorite childhood memories of this area.
Well, back then, there were many symbols of the war between the states, this American Civil War. And one of those was the battle on Nelson's Canal. And there was a gunboat. This is a fact. There was a gunboat sunken. I don't know whether it was a Union or a Confederate boat, but the hull was sticking out of the mud flat right there on Nelson's Canal. And my father pulled out a huge spike right there in one of the beams. You know, I remember him bending over and the stripe of dust, of rust across the palm of his hand. And that boat was sunken there, I think, by, let's see, it was 1863 when there was an invasion from South or East Louisiana that went west when the Yankees, or they called them bluebellies back then. The Yankees were chasing Colonel Mouton down through the uh, western parishes. Anyway, but those things were always at the end of your fingers. And the home, the old Burke home down on the bayou there, uh, had trees that still had the chains of, uh, excuse me, anyway, rusted chains that grew in and out of the bark. And those were a bad memory. Of course, I'm talking about slavery. But anyway, the present was always the past, and the past was always present. And it's still there. In our home there on Laurelville Highway, those trees are around 200 years. In 1863, 20,000 Union soldiers marched right down that two-lane highway. It's still there.
Did
I
you
mean,
ever
for a historian, go ahead.
well, as a young person, did you ever think that you were living in such a rich vein for writing? At what point did you realize you had a setting for so many of your works? Did you have any sense of that
Oh,
as a child?
yes. Oh, absolutely. I never wanted to be anything except a writer or a painter. I tried to become a painter when I was only about in the third grade, and I didn't do well as a painter.
I wish I could see some early James Lee Burke paintings. That sounds fascinating. And you had some good
Well, but
you had some good advice as a young writer who someone encouraged you.
well, I went to SLI, and I was 19 years old, and Lyle Williams was my uh, English professor. She would really change my life because I, anyway. But she brought one day her friend, or excuse me, Irving Stone, the famous author. He wrote Lust for Life. In this guy, Kurt Douglas. Uh, anyway, he talked to us a little gathering by 8 or 9 kids. Most of kids from uh, humble art, backgrounds like me, and but anyway, we realized we were in the presence of a very famous man, but he was such a gentleman, and he gave us some advice about becoming an author. And there were I jotted a few of them down. I've gone by these things all these years, and I know everything he said was right. He said, if you want to be a writer, uh, don't write for money. It won't work. And in other words, if you write a poem to uh, pay for the light bill, be assured your lights are going to be turned off. And then he said, number two, because he made a lot of money in Hollywood. He said, number two, never tell movie makers how to make a movie because you will never change one word of anything they write. So have lunch with everybody on the set, then go back home and don't come back again. And then what was another one? Golly, he said, never put a friend in one of your stories and then tell him about it because he will never forgive you. However, if you say nothing, he will never recognize himself. All of those things are true. That's it.
And if you could give advice to aspiring writers like myself and some people in the audience that one day maybe we'll be on a Zoom call years down the road repeating what James Lee Burke told us, what would you say?
Well, never quit. That's it. The the gift, and it is a gift, is one that is implanted in the person for one reason or another. And if it's in you in the one's breast, that somewhere out there in the cosmos, that there's a reason for the raison d'etre is there. It's there. It's for a reason. And then eventually the reason will be made known to us. And every artist, doesn't matter, musician, writer, sculptor, every one of them knows that I'm telling the truth. They each know that the gift is not to be toyed with, that in effect, that you have a contract with some force that is outside of yourself. In the background of the person, the education, the race, it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with it. And the day that the artist takes claim or takes credit for the gift, that is the day it will be taken from him. I have never seen the exception. In other words, uh, my heavens, it's there's something that it makes you kind of egocentric, but in a good way, and say, I've got a gift other people don't, but you don't talk about it. You don't talk about it. Okay, just I had a very peculiar history as a writer. I finished my first novel, Half of Paradise, when I was 23 years old. And then I published three uh, novels in New York City. That was a big deal. And I got a six-column headline New York Times review. I never got a review like that again. And when I looked at it, I said, hey, that's pretty interesting. Well, after my third book, I went 13 years without publishing in hardback. I wrote every kind of story. I wrote books I still have in a box, and I could not sell ice cream in Hades. And then after 13 years, LSU Press put me in print again. They published a novel called Good Heavens, what is it? Anyway, they put me back in print, and it's been rock and roll ever since. But that novel that I wrote after 13 years, or went through 13 years, was rejected by 111 publishers over all those years. Philip Spitzer, who's passed away now, was a cab. He ran a cab service. He was a cab driver who ran a literary service at night. And he worked in Hell's Kitchen in New York. And I said, man, this is the guy for me. But he and I got together. My wife, Pearl, finally told me, she said, send it to LSU Press. And they did. And I'll always be indebted to them.
Go LSU Press. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you keep going with those rejections? What kept how did you keep the faith?
Well, that's it. You'd never lose faith in the gift. That's it. And it's it hurts, when you get your material back and says, you know, here's your stuff. In fact, um, my manuscript was so battered, it looked like it had been beaten up, it had been stabbed with ballpoint pins and whiskey rings all around my words.
Well, at least they were reading it then.
Yeah, and the last fellow, I think, before I sent it to LSU, the last fellow, he got angry. He wrote me, told me, no, I'm not going to even, I cannot say in a in the situation we are in now, the language that he used about my story. In fact, the kindest thing he said was something like, uh, "This would be good for some second-rate He-Man something or another." But anyway, it was. I'm not. I'm not exaggerating. It's anyway. Thank goodness for LSU.
And tell me a little bit about the actual brass tacks. I found that very inspiring what you said about if you have a gift, you work at it. For you, you are so prolific and you are writing. What does nurturing that gift and working on it look like? When are you waking up? When are you writing? You're working at it. Tell me those specifics.
Yeah, I get up about 8:30 with it and start the day, and I work and with an aim, with a purpose. That I try to get 750 words a day, 750 good words, and then I rewrite the work of yesterday, and I go till about 11 o'clock at night, and I do other things in the day, and we uh, have a ranch and things. I have a lot of things I have to do, and I have to go to a health club. It's a great life, but it's always inside you. It's always inside you, and you have to look. A good writer is a good listener. That's it. That's the key. And the key to literary art uh, is totally about centered around dialogue. It's dialogue. And you never waste a word that's audible. And you listen to people on buses. That's where the great stories are. The great stories are in the hearts of humble people that who wants to hang around some guys that are just, you know, I just don't. I don't want to say things about it. Bad. Uh, uh, the excuse me, the manufactured material like advertising is that's great. That's our thing, but it's not art. The art is out there in great stage. It's always there, but you have to listen for it. That's why, again, that humility is a necessity greater than just simply a virtue. Every author has to have that love of humanity. I mean, many authors, famous people, kind of obnoxious guys, but it's just the neurosis. Look, I think it was Freud who said that it is the neurosis that allows for the artist to have access to the unconscious, but you pay a price too. About 4 o'clock in the morning, I know the next two scenes, but not until about 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's because the story is already written. Hemingway said it right before his death. So did William Faulkner before his passing. Faulkner said, had the had the books not been written, someone else, another hand, would have written them for me. And uh, Ernest Hemingway, I think the night before he took his life, wrote Hadley. I'm not wrote Hadley, called her on the telephone in Florida. And he said, I just reread The Old Man in the Sea. And it is as though someone else wrote it. They both said the same thing. But that's it. It's already it's the unconscious. Another hand has put it there. It's not creativity, it's discovery.
Mm. That's beautiful, and I'm curious about your neuroses. Then, what are your neuroses as an artist?
Oh, I don't know. I'm afraid of it. It's,
Very diplomatic non-answer there, I think. I'm curious. I think a lot about creative people and this idea of flow, sort of when time disappears. I think some of us, whether we play sports or have an artistic practice, understand this experience of being in your natural child or this experience where time just sort of disappears. As a writer and editor, I find myself in flow when I'm doing an interview, when I'm talking to someone. And then I don't always find myself in flow in the writing part of it. The writing part feels like work. And then on the other end, the editing part feels like flow again. So I've got the flow of the interview, the work of the writing, and then flow and magic kind of happening again in the editing part of it. And I'm curious at what part in your process you feel the most just flow and time rolling by without noticing it.
Well, I think actually uh, showed every facet of writing, and that's why, of course, you're successful and and you understand the written word. And in effect, what we're talking about are there's several levels of how do we succeed as an author. And of course, the enemy of all writing is fatigue. There are lots of things a person can do when he's tired or she's tired, but writing is not one of them. And so that that for me is the enemy. When people either take away one's time, that's a theft that you cannot undo, or that in some way burden you and when you become fatigued, and it's a torture because you can't get it out. You just can't. It's not going to work. But it's what early hours for me are the best. Uh, the early hours for me are the best. So and that's it. It's just you listen again. It's like music. It's just you listen to it, and there are things that you know that other people do not. But again, it's it's kind of like keeping a treasury box. If you lock it up, and again, that silence often is. I think Hemingway said that. He said he he was more successful with what he took out of his prose than he put in his prose. That's it. You have to know how to make a whisper shout.
And you said fatigue is the enemy. So how do you take care of yourself and make sure that you're rested? And how are you taking care of yourself these days?
Well, it's always a battle. I mean, you have to. Uh, I mean, when people knock on your door and say, "Hey, you don't mind me bringing over the neighborhood," that's that's not a good moment. I remember, I remember a good friend of mine. It was Ron Hansen. Uh, is a great writer, but Ron said, and he was kidding. He says, "The mailman is my enemy because here comes the mail, and you got to stop and do things like pay the bills." But no, it's that thing that you have to. That one of the Rover Show titles is a private cathedral. It's a private cathedral.
Yeah. What are you
It's a lot like some. Excuse me.
What are you working on right now? What's up next?
I'm finishing a Dave Roberts Show book, Dave and Cleet.
I think you heard there was a strong reaction of happiness to that one.
And you know the book uh, Cleet is coming out in June 6th. The title is just Cleet, and it's Cleet's book. Cleet narrates it. Uh, Dave is with him.
And you have the new one is you revisited the short story form. Is that right? For the first time in a while?
Uh, well, I have a collection of book. Yeah, it's called Harbor Lights, and it's a collection of stories that I go, I guess, go back about 25 years, and I've had two other collections that were published.
just before our chat, we had a inspiring talk with the sculptor of your sculpture, and we just wanted to know what's it like to know that there's going to be a statue of you in New Iberia downtown.
Well, I was, I can't tell you how humbled I am. I, when I was told that, I believe it was the mayor, and he seemed like a really nice gentleman. Uh, who told me this, and some other people did as well. I said, I think I kind of knocked on the uh, telephone, make sure there was some static, something wrong here. So we can say that again. And I was, no, we were doing a this was a famous lady in Texas is going to do this, painting, a sculptor. Sculpt, as my heavens, well, I don't know. I think, I hope, yeah, I'm honored. It's an enormous.
And I was wondering if you could just look right in the camera because we have to make sure she got the eyes right. That's what we learned. There we go.
Okay, okay.
We'll be. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking in your eyes. Right. What do you? What will you always carry with you from Louisiana and from your hometown? What's something you'll never forget?
Uh, what do I remember most about it? Or
Sure.
I didn't hear that.
What will you always carry with you from your hometown?
Oh, just all the memories of our family and their friends and oh, my heavens, yeah. And it was a wonderful era. And golly Moses, gee, oh, I don't know. It's just like kind of it's like heaven. It's back there, of course, those war years and but anyway, I think it was the era in which I grew up was one that has passed away for good or bad, and my generation will probably be the last uh, that to see what we used to call traditional America. It's a different country in many ways, for good or bad, but that place, New Iberia, and all that area. My heaven's sakes, it's Eden. Boy, we've got to keep it. We have got to keep it. This is the real struggle. It's all over the globe. Uh, I, I, I think the die is cast, but in some ways, I say die and cast. It is not, the die is not cast. Uh, we, I don't know. I hope that we have a better chance than I think we're willing so far to acknowledge. I don't want to get into that. It's a time. It's we're in very dairy. I think you don't need me to know what how to think. But anyway, uh, New Iberia is just a wonderful place, and and Acadian people are good people, and the hospitality is wonderful. I mean, these are the most hospitable, kind people in the world. It's like going to a place to learn how to do everything right when it comes to manners and just general goodness. I mean, they are very good people.
I want to let them
They always.
a few questions, so I'll repeat any questions that I get from the audience, if that's all right, Jim.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sure.
He said, Mr. Burke, my father was a big fan of your work. Said, I'm here today in his honor. And when did you say the new book will be released?
Okay, and the Clint book.
And Your newest the
Cleats.
new Robichaux book?
No, I've okay. I probably uh, didn't get things straight. All right, excuse me. Let me have a glass of water. Just a moment.
Stumped him with your question.
Yeah, I just yeah, I'm finishing the a new book uh, narrated by Dave Robichaux. I haven't quite finished it. I've got a little over 100,000 words, and I'm working on it. And there's a book that is already published. It just hasn't gone into the stores, and it's titled Cleat. And I think it will be in stores on June the 5th. Yeah, I hope you all enjoy it.
Cleat will be out
Cleat's a
June
great character.
11th. There, you've got a great publicist, Aaron. Says Cleat will be out on June 11th. Smiley face.
Uh,
Thank you, Aaron. Another question, Betty? Yes, right here in the front.
Dr. Brent Prather, I bragged that I'm your biggest fan, and it's 25 years ago when I talked to you at church and you signed a bunch of my books. You told me that every morning you start off going to Mass, and then you go home and you write for about 8 hours. So the question is, it sounds like now you sleep a little later, but you write longer. The spirituality in your books, where does that spirituality come from again?
Well, I didn't get that. I don't ever remember saying went to mass every day. Uh, I'm a Catholic, but anyway, no matter. I don't know how to define spirituality. I think there's a veil, some way, somewhere there, and we participate in it, or we do not. And there's certain choices we make, but um, it has more to do, I think. I mean, what we're talking about here, spirituality and creativity, it is again recognition of a flight, and it's one that a person nurses and he hides it, and that's what we were talking about earlier. A person can call it spiritual, but in my feeling is exactly that. It is spiritual, but look. I'm 87 years old, and I kept waiting all these years for wisdom because we always associate wisdom with age. If that's the truth, it went right past me. Boy, zooming. The great mysteries remain for me the great mysteries. That's it. But anyway, uh, I think there's no question though about creativity and spirituality. This is the way I feel about it. It's like dipping your hand into water or into infinity. It is the one area in which we actually uh, share a moment with God. He is the creator, and art is part of it. And every writer knows that. The most callous, the most mean spirited, the guy that you would like to shove off of a cliff knows that this is it. And that anything other than that, that gift that he has, is calling on. And it means that, my heavens, got something going. It's pretty good. And but anyway, I uh, I I can't define many of the things that are in my work. I don't remember what I write. The books go away. I have a hard time remembering where, and it's always been that way. It's a little bit like a non-chemical blackout, and every 2 to 48 hours, I don't remember the story. General the story. I think I get up in the morning and I realize I really wrote something pretty good yesterday, but I have to get inside the pages again and again. This is the way I think about it. If you look at a tree, if you look at a tree, story is inside it, and the tree is ground into pulp, and the pulp is made into paper, and then the ink is in the hand, and the hand has this moment of delivery through the arm, into the eye, into the page, and suddenly you have a story. And where did it come from? Most of the time, I don't have any idea. I never know where the story is going. And I maybe years later, I will figure out where the characters came from. Then probably they are synthesis of several people, but the characters seem to have on stage. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Go ahead. Oh,
I wish all of those
oh,
resulted in what he's talking about. That's incredible. Another question? I think we've got a microphone that's coming to you.
oh, yeah. No, I know the gentleman who just talked to me. I know the conversation we had. Uh, I, I, I remember. Okay, all right. No, because I wrote a story called. Um, oh, geez, I don't know. I'm sorry. Go ahead if you would. Don't pay too much attention to me. Consider the story.
No, we're riveted. We're the tree metaphor. We've got one more. We've got another question.
Okay, the question would be, we've been reading about David Cleat for 20, 25 years. Is there ever a chance of a prequel that would give us their origins in New Orleans PD?
Did you hear that?
I couldn't. There's an echo.
It said they've been, reading about David Cleat for years. Is there ever any chance of a prequel that would tell the story of their time in the New Orleans PD?
Okay, is there one in the making that would go back to the early years when they were walking a beat?
Yes.
I hadn't thought of one. I think there's a kind of a recall almost with all the books. It's hard to write a series without uh, oh creating a character that's doing the same thing over and over again. In other words, you have to tell the stories from the past, but you have to create a new story to create a new story. So it's a balance, but I think so far I've done pretty well with it. But it's a challenge. What your question is a good one, but it's a challenge.
Maybe he's planted a seed for the readers are asking. Any other questions? Yep, over here.
You and I both have a common work experience in newspapers and pipelines. I'm curious how that affected your work as a novelist, pipelines and newspapers.
I love this question, Jim. He said, you and I have a common work past in newspapers and pipelines. And how did those experiences shape your work in newspapers and pipelines?
Well, it's actually that's a good question, and I think the answer is it's the culture, not really the thing that we were doing with our hands, like all on pipelines. It's a culture. You learn many things, good and bad. You learn the secrets. You learn about the oil business. You see tragedy, blowout. See, and when you work in a excuse me, and when you work in a newsroom, you don't learn to write. You learn the city. That's it. It's anthropology. It's not literature. And good writers. Hemingway was a good journalist, but not because of his writing. It was his knowledge of people. And it's the same, I think, with any good journalist. He's a good listener. That's it.
Question in the blue.
Were you an avid reader growing up in elementary school and high school and college throughout your younger years?
Were you an avid reader in elementary, middle, and high school throughout your school years?
Yes. Oh, I'm glad that lady brought that up. The great teacher for me was the bookmobile. That was during the war, and that was a that was a depression program uh, created by Franklin Roosevelt, and bookmobile was an old panel truck that had shelves inside of it. Every Thursday would come down the street, and well, we lived on a beautiful street in Houston. That was oaks all over the place and horses. Anyway, but there were times where scarce and people were poor. And the kids ran from all the houses to get the Hardy Boy books. And one of the books that has a little girl as the heroine. Oh, geez. Anyway, but yeah, Nancy Drew, my heavens. But man, if you weren't out there at the truck, you would in a hurry. You wouldn't get a chance to get a book for the week. But that's when I learned my love of reading. I was not a good student in school during the early years until I got to SLI. It was Ms. Williams that helped me because I'll never forget what she said. She was giving me D minuses on all my essays, and my papers looked like a disemboweled cow, just red ink. But I never got any grade except a D minus. And I went to her office and I finally asked her, why, Ms. Williams, do I always get a D minus? And she said, you have, I think, you have the, what was it? Golly, somebody says, I couldn't give you an F because you write with such heart. But anyway, she said she'd make a deal with me every Saturday to come into her office and rewrite a weekly essay, and she would go over it with me. I got a B. B is in Bravo, and I made the honor roll. That's it. That is it. And I graduated with honors from the University of Missouri later, and it was because of Ms. Williams. She changed my life.
We are so glad that you continue to write with such heart, and we'll give you higher marks than what she gave you. We are going to walk over and see your statue dedication, and I just wanted you to have the last word. Just leave us with some closing words, and then we just want to say thank you for being here.
Well, thank you all for being here for me. Golly Moses, it sounds like you have a really nice audience, and I really appreciate all. And in fact, all of New Iberia. Just I'll never get over the gift that you all have given me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Jim, we're gonna look at the eyes. We're gonna look at the eyes. You
mean mine?
you
Whose?
you've really blessed this community, and it was such a pleasure to be here with you all. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.